Hey guys, it's your host, Avery Carl with the Short Term Shop, and I'm really excited to dive into the Broken Bow market with you guys. We've got 10 episodes on everything you need to know about investing in short-term rentals in Broken Bow. A couple notes that I want to give you guys before we get started. Any up-to-date purchase prices or income numbers on this market you can find on our website, theshorttermshop.com. And if you're ready to buy with us in any of the 20 markets that we work in, not just Broken Bow, if you want to work with one of our agents in any of those markets, you can email us at agents@theshorttermshop.com. Be sure to follow us on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook at The Short Term Shop. And of course, join our Facebook group. It's called Short Term Rental, Long Term Wealth. It's just me and 60,000 of my closest friends in there talking about short-term rentals all day, every day. Again, if you need anything from us, you can email us at agents@theshorttermshop.com. Let's dive into Broken Bow. Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the Short Term Show mini-series on Broken Bow. Today we're doing calendars and pricing. Luke is already being really distracting on the camera. So we do have a lot of familiar faces here, one of which is Luke. So I will let him go ahead and introduce himself since he is already being distracting. Go ahead.
Hey, I am the host of the Short Term Rental Management Podcast. I own the longest running Airbnb in a couple of markets. Been in this business for a long time. I have the honor of teaching every short-term shop client ever how to be a better landlord. And I do that through a class called Management Monday, which is free for short-term shop clients, theshorttermshop.com, where I am the director of education. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Next we have our expert agent in Broken Bow, Kathy Craig. Kathy, say hello.
Hey everybody, Kathy Craig, Broken Bow, Oklahoma.
And last, another familiar face, Wilson Van Hook. Wilson, you want to say hello real quick and maybe introduce yourself again?
Yep. I'm Wilson, and we own a couple of properties in Broken Bow, and things were going really well with that. So we opened up our own management company called Vandel Vacation Rentals, and so now we manage quite a few properties in Broken Bow.
Awesome. So now I'm going to hand the reins over to Luke here. He's going to drive the calendars and pricing episode. So Luke, I will let you take it over from here.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk seasonality. What does the average 12-month calendar look like? Are there periods of time in the year where people are not coming, or are we pretty busy all the time?
It's busy all the time. Yeah, busy all the time. And a lot of it has to do with, we have a lot of couples business. We have a lot of one-bedroom cabins and do a ton of small family and couples. So they'll come, January, February. I mean, it's an all year round place.
Yeah, it is all year round. I know there are some beach markets out there, for instance, that, they are completely dead in the wintertime. We're not like that. At least for, occupancy will go down in some months and rates will go down in some months, but people are visiting the market all year long.
What would you say are the slower, occupancy months, and how would that compare, say, on like a 2-bedroom cabin? Like can I get 90% in a busy month, and then what percentage in a slow month, and what month is that?
So the popular months are March is a good month because we get spring break, and Oklahoma and Texas now, they usually split their spring break on 2 different weeks. So that's good for our market because you'll get some people visiting on spring break from Oklahoma on 1 week and then Texas on the next week. And then in the summertime, obviously, we're very busy. The summer is the best time of the year. So June, July are really good. And then about half of August before people start going back to school. And then we're in the best time of the year right now. October, November, and December are absolutely glorious in this market. They're amazing. We get really high occupancy, high rates, and that's for all cabins. Now, in the busy months, even the largest cabins can run up to 90% occupancy. And
okay, so sounds to me like I'm hearing the school months or where it slows down a little bit, like May, September. We need to kind of pay a little more attention to those, but still not too bad.
Yes, the slowest months of the year would be January and February after people go back to school, and then April's pretty slow, and September's really slow.
But we're still going to get guests. We just have to try a little harder in those months.
Exactly. Yeah. And there will be some days during the week that occupancy market wide is 5% or lower for bigger cabins, for instance. The smaller cabins, you can still rent out weekdays any time of year. The 1-bedroom cabins in particular, you can rent out any calendar day on the entire year. There's going to be people visiting.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have a video on this called the Circle of Seasonality, which it sounds like your market stands up with most of the best vacation rental markets nationwide, as far as pretty high occupancy year round, which is what a lot of people are looking for. You mentioned Kathy, smaller properties. You do have larger properties, I would assume, and what's going to be the difference in booking the bigger one versus the larger one?
Yeah. So for smaller cabins, like I said, we can run, you can do over 90% occupancy for the 1-bedroom cabins, 90 to 95% year round. As a whole for the year. And
that's somebody that's really hustling though, right? I'm not just some average Joe off the street coming out with 95%. That's somebody that's paying attention, listening to podcasts, and really putting in the effort, I would assume.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you have to do the work. You have to put in the time to get to that occupancy. You have to be paying attention to the calendar, and you have to have all of your, dynamic pricing settings set up correctly. You've got to be willing to drop down the rates on some of those last minute, weeknights that nobody has booked your calendar yet. But if you implement all of, the best practices, you can get to, even all the way up to 95% occupancy for the entire year. The 2 cabins that we own ourselves are 1-bedroom cabins. And it's because I like high occupancy. I like the security of somebody's on any particular day, I could book this cabin. Whereas, a 5-bedroom cabin, there are days in the year that there's just literally nobody visiting the market on, a Tuesday in the middle of January. Mm-hmm. So I like the high occupancy. So I prefer the 1-bedroom cabins myself.
I agree with you. I like them too. They are they're meat and potatoes. You just don't really have to worry about them. They're always there for you, and you can pretty much guarantee they're fairly easy to book in most cases. That being said, I am going to play devil's advocate. Sometimes those bigger ones, it's nice to not have to work so hard, but it is a little more stressful, especially if you're just kind of starting out, to think, oh man, there's a good chance that this thing is not going to get booked in these dates, or maybe the early weekdays, Monday, Tuesdays of certain weeks. And that can be a little stressful for a newer investor, or maybe somebody who is, a little maybe lower net worth type of an individual. That can be stressful, but I do like the bigger cabins because they give me a little bit more breathing room occasionally, where I don't have to work as hard. But that being said, you do have more warm bodies in the reservation. There's ups and downs there. We're not here to talk about cabin size, but just be aware that the bigger the property gets, in any good vacation market, the occupancy is going to go. I hate to say occupancy goes down, but it does. So it's definitely a sliding scale. A lot more 1 and 2 person groups out there than there are 14 person groups. So it's really just kind of common sense. Do you have any issues booking early weekdays or mid weekdays? And again, is that going to be size of property specific?
Yeah, that would definitely depend on the size of the property. Like I said, so the smaller cabins, any particular day you can book. What happens is the 2-bedroom cabins and the 3-bedroom cabins will end up competing against 1-bedroom cabins on dates that aren't popular. And so for those properties, if you're willing to drop your rates down a little bit and try to incentivize people to stay at your 2 or 3-bedroom cabin, you can also compete against the 1-bedroom cabins on some of those weekdays. Now, the 4 to 5-bedroom cabins are going to run somewhere around probably 60% occupancy, and they'll do 90% in the summertime. So that tells you how slow some of the other months can be to, what you're saying, where there are times where you can be pretty hands off and, you don't have to manage, but maybe a few weekends, here and there.
Absolutely. So in other words, when we ask about, talk about how long the season is, it's basically all the time, but you're going to need to focus on January and February a little bit more. And of course, May and September, a little bit more to make sure that you're getting in there. You don't want to get lazy. Of course, you can't get lazy in any market, on any type of property. You got to get in there and change your prices. If you're just stumbling on this podcast for the first time and this is your first experience with short term, we would highly recommend that you don't stay stagnant. Change your listing as much as possible, and pricing as well. And pricing is vastly important. In other words, a lot of folks will say prices are too high. You hear that constantly. Your prices are too high. Your prices are too high. But there's a lot of other stuff you need to be looking at before you go straight for the low-hanging fruit of changing the prices. That's kind of at the bottom of the pyramid, if in my eyes. Whereas you can move your headline and your description and other such values of your home and your property, or even remodel a bathroom. Of course, that's expensive. So in other words, if you're competing against a guy that's got 2 brand new bathrooms and a gorgeous kitchen with all, like navy blue cabinets and flat gold hardware, which is all the rage right now, and you've got Formica countertops and just regular pressed wood finish on your cabinets, doesn't mean you can't get booked, but your prices are going to need to be, I guess, realistic is the right word there. And maybe you didn't spend as much on that property. That's another thing to consider. Rehabs on kitchens and bathrooms are expensive. So that's kind of how we did it in the early days. Is we would buy a house that definitely was kind of maybe even all the original stuff in there, and over time you creep those rents up slowly by offering new amenities and doing rehabs. And that's just rental real estate in general. That's nothing special with short term. It's the exact same thing in long term, where if you've got granite countertops and vinyl floors, and your neighbor has rolled flooring and black old 20-year-old black appliances, and you've got stainless, just common sense, your house is going to rent for more. So, and again, there's no reason you need to compare yourself to the crazy over the top house with the giraffe in the backyard for the kids to pet. If you don't have the giraffe, then your prices are a little lower. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's going to be a customer for all different aspects of those, those houses. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, that's the good thing about our market is we do have a lot of variety. You can be that budget friendly rental, or you can be that luxury rental. We have a pretty big variety. So for people looking to purchase a cabin, you can go either way, and you can go the route of getting something a little bit older that needs a little bit of work and add improvements to it over time as well.
Yeah, AirDNA has you at number 17 in the U.S. as 17th best vacation rental market, which is very high. You got to understand, there's hundreds and hundreds of these. I think they did that out of 300-ish markets. So you guys are top 20. That's huge, and there's a very big draw for many different areas of the world to come to hang out with you guys and party. So I guess, I'm just going to throw the enemy method out there because it's part of our culture here at the shop. And if you're mostly, if you're concerned on how do I figure out how much to price this thing? What's my price per night? I always go to the enemy method, which you can find at enemymethod.com. It's a video Avery did ages ago. And it's basically, again, just comparing yourself to your neighbors and your competition, which is why we call them the enemy, because we want to take them down and be better than them. And that's kind of how I spend the bulk of my pricing day to day, is by just, saying, okay. And again, I learned it from long-term rental. You go on Zillow, I find what houses are for rent in my little neighborhood. There may only be one or two when it comes to long-term, and there's a lot less you can find out for pricing a long-term than versus a short-term. Because you're only pricing one number for an entire year, where in short term, you're pricing 365 different numbers on your calendar. And that's where things start to get tricky. But I do want to encourage folks to not drive themselves nuts there. It's 365 versus one. But, really the only wrong answer is a property that's not booked. And again, let me go back to the long-term thing. And I know this is a completely different thing, but there's been times where I had a property listed for rent that I had it, let's say $1,500 because I just, was enemy methoding and I thought that's what it was worth. And then 2 months goes by and that damn thing's been sitting empty because I couldn't get it rented for $1,500 a month. So, I could have, after 2 weeks, dropped it to $1,400 and saved myself like $2,000 or whatever, 14 times 1.5. But what would, I think a lot of times what happens is people hold on to what they think their house is going to rent for, and then they end up not getting booked and kick themselves in the foot, really. I don't know if you can do that. I guess you have 2 feet, right? But anyway, so in other words, put the asses in the seats. I think Wilson and I agree on that. There's multiple ways, multiple strategies, I suppose, for pricing your calendar. I've definitely always been an asses in the seats guy. Fill in that calendar as much as I possibly can. Spend as much time. The bulk of my management is spent on pricing. And then I would say that the next most time consuming for me as far as landlording on short terms is remodeling, rehabs, roofs, kitchens, floors, paint, making, because those things all affect the price. Right.
Back to your point about, putting butts in seats. We actually recently experimented with this past Labor Day. And, looking at the data, it shows that we hit market wide like 99% occupancy for Labor Day weekend. So we decided to experiment a little bit and hold our rates really high, above just a premium to see if, since cabins are going to book literally every single cabin, we'll just keep holding those rates extremely high and see if somebody will book. And what we found out is, about half of our properties, we ended up having to do what you're saying, kind of comparing to like the long-term rental. If you would have just set the rate lower initially, you would have gotten somebody in there quicker and you wouldn't have lost some revenue. And so we ended up having to drop some of those rates a little bit lower than we wanted to, kind of last minute. Whereas if we would have just found an appropriate price from the get-go that was still a premium rate, we would have booked it. Let's say there's a cabin that it would have booked for $1,200. We were holding at $1,400 or $1,500, thinking that our cabin is going to absolutely book. Well, if it doesn't, then it's, if you want to play that risk game, then if it doesn't book, now maybe you end up having to drop it down to $800 or $900 a night last minute because you held out too long. So my preference is just price it at that $1,200 initially. Just kind of make sure you're going to book. It's still a premium rate. It's still high, and just lock in somebody on that cabin, lock in that high occupancy and that good rate.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. That's an old school short-term trick where a lot of there's people that do that with every night of the year, not just holidays, where but let's take Christmas, for instance. They'll keep Christmas through the roof. And then what happens is that all the other Christmases book. And then you can theoretically get a premium because you were the only one available. And there's people that have been doing that for a long time. And it can work, especially if you have tried it for a year or two. Now, I don't personally do that. I agree with Wilson. I don't do that because, yes, you can maybe a couple extra bucks doing it that way. Or like Wilson said, you might end up losing a couple of bucks, but that's not my concern. My concern there is just overall management, especially on a holiday guest. Now, holiday guests are traditionally a pain in the rear end. And if you're waiting to the last minute and you're basically the only property left and your prices are super high because you're the only property left, and you get that high dollar, now you've got an overpriced property, most likely. You've got a guest that paid an absolute premium for your house, and it is the biggest pain in the rear end guest season of the year. So not only do you have a pain in the ass guest because it's a holiday, these are the type of folks that don't generally get out of the house that much. The stress is always very high during the holidays. The family's already arguing with each other, and they're going to find reasons to argue about your home. But they've also paid way more than everybody else. And not only that, but they've chosen the only home that was available. And it's because they took too long. And it's their fault. But had all of the properties been available at that moment that they booked, they probably wouldn't have picked your house. They only picked it because your price was so high, you were the last one standing. And so to me, it's just a recipe for disaster of management and bad review, a little bad review factory to do it like that. I definitely much prefer to, and again, we're way in the weeds now. We're way off on a tangent here, but I much prefer to kind of, have calculated prices. I want to price my property, especially we're talking about holidays right now. to get the best holiday experience for my guests. And I know that the type of guest that books last minute and is only picking me because I was the only one available, they're probably not going to have the greatest holiday, and maybe they never have the greatest holiday, but that's not somebody I want in one of my houses. Anyway, I figured Avery would direct.
Agreed. 100% agreed.
So we've talked about seasonality. We talked about kind of guests you don't want in your houses. Is there any we touched on minimum and maximum night stay, but I mean, how soon what's the lead time? How soon do we need to start lowering prices if we're looking at, okay, we're in November now. You probably already have the holidays booked, but let's say we don't have our Christmas booked yet. How soon do we need to start lowering prices to make sure we get that booked?
Are we sticking with the holidays, or is this just any old time of the year?
I think any time of the year. I'm just, because we're in November right now, that would be the next thing that I'd be looking at. So at any point during the year, that might be a potential high season.
I think that for holidays, you can wait a little bit longer. You can probably wait till about a month out for places like, holidays like Christmas that run high occupancy. But then, like to Luke's previous point that, there are a lot of factors that come into play after that point. Once you get down into like the couple week mark, for the kind of guests that you're going to get and the kind of rate you're going to get. So I think you can hold out till about a month out. Now, based on, talking generally speaking, for any time of the year, for 1-bedroom cabins and 2-bedroom cabins, you can hold out without having to tank your rate down for quite a while, because lead time is significantly shorter for the smaller cabins, and it's probably like this in most markets. But for 1-bedroom cabins, if you're still there are open dates only a couple weeks out on your calendar, there's still a great chance you're going to end up booking that cabin. For larger cabins, you really want to stay ahead of things. And if you get down to the point where it's, a month out, it's probably time to really start focusing on that pricing and crank it down over that next week to try to get that place booked. So you're not within the 2 to 3 week mark, because like we talked about before, it's hard to get a group of 16, 14 people together and coordinate a trip. So they're booking further out in advance. You can wait, it's probably time to start monitoring those rates about a month and a half out for the larger cabins, and really start paying a little bit of attention and tear it down a little bit. And then if you hit a month out and you're still not booked, I think that next week is probably pretty crucial to really, really focus on that, pay attention to that rate, and try to get that, that property booked. So another thing that we do, this is a little trick that you can do for our market. We are more of a weekend market than a week-long market. So what we do on our calendar for far out dates is we will put 3-night, 4-night minimums on weekend days, because otherwise it's very easy to get 2-night bookings on Friday, Saturday. There are so many groups traveling and they're just going Friday, Saturday. So if your dates are far out on the calendar, you don't want months in advance to get a 2-day booking. And now you've got all weekdays open, particularly for the larger cabins. Because like we talked about, it's not impossible to get weekdays booked out for small cabins, but larger cabins, you want to try to get a 3 or 4 day booking on a weekend if possible, to tack on some of those days that, a Thursday or a Sunday probably will not end up booking otherwise, especially in the slow season. So those are some tricks that we kind of do. And then probably about when you hit about 45 days out, it's time to just go ahead and go down to 2-night minimums for the weekends if you haven't booked yet.
Yeah. Well, Airbnb has a statistic. 90% of all vacations are booked 30 days in advance or less. And if you're brand new, fresh to this, and not the kind of person that wants to drive yourself absolutely insane, because there are a lot of people out there that do want to do that, I would just stick to that. I like my calendars I used to like them to be about 5 or 6 weeks booked. And then COVID happened and people's travel routines got completely changed, and they're still a little bit out of whack. So I'm back to that just good old fashioned Airbnb statistic, which is, again, it's a worldwide number there. So you're talking about every property they've got in the entire world. But I like to be right around that number. And on a smaller property, I'm okay with being, maybe 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out. What I mean by that is like my calendar is full for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Larger property, I would probably rather have 4, maybe 5 weeks filled, which
I think it's very accurate. Yeah, that's where we're at in this market. That's how we view it for lead time.
Yeah, which in summertime 23 has been a little difficult because we got a little. I think we got some folks got comfortable with the kind of maybe a slightly further out booked calendar, and summer 23 is when the people could get back on airplanes for the first time, like comfortably. I mean, it's obviously airplanes have been going on for a number of months and years now since COVID, the pandemic. But 23 seems like when really everybody kind of said, holy, wow, look at this. Let's go get on an airplane. Let's go to Spain. Let's go try something new, where they were traveling to areas like Broken Bow for 2 or 3 years before that. So the advanced availability did get out of whack a little bit. And it seems to be coming back around. I mean, there was a period over the summertime where I was having my little properties only booked like 2 weeks out. And it was weird. It was kind of stressful, to be honest. But they did get booked. And I am looking at a better overall calendar as far as gross income is concerned for 23 than I had in 22. It's going to be real neck and neck, which is, I'm more than happy with that. I was actually willing to take a little bit of a loss on 23 versus 22 because 22 was so crazy. But all things looking pretty good. I think, and then we're ending the year pretty strong. I was looking at my calendars this morning, and just across multiple markets here. And I'm a little more booked than I would like to be. But I think just a general rule of thumb, especially if you're new, and again, obviously varies greatly, mostly by size of property and also by time of year. 30 days in advance is a great rule of thumb.
All right. So what else have we not covered in relation to pricing and or calendars that we think the listeners could benefit from hearing?
I think we did a pretty good job. Again, just to reiterate, my deal there is if your calendar's not booked, you're making a mistake. You are not doing your job. And, again, we want to make sure that everybody understands what they're getting themselves into here. It's not necessarily a super easy gig. It is a lot of fun. I would argue all day long that my long terms are very often more of a pain in the ass than my short terms, quite frankly. But you are dealing with a lot of personalities on vacation, and you got to make sure you're showing them a good time. I want to throw that out there too. I love my guests. We want to make sure that they're number one all the time. They deserve an amazing vacation, even when they're being a pain in the rear end. And I think most importantly is that never let your calendar stay the same. You got to keep moving things around. That's going to make your property more attractive than the next guy.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that about covers it. So guys, if you're ready to buy something with Kathy in Broken Bow, you can email us at agents@theshorttermshop.com and we'll get you connected with her. Or if you just want to hang out with us, learn more about short-term rentals, you can join our Facebook group. It is the same title as my book right behind me, Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. You can hang out with us and 60,000 of our closest friends and talk about short-term rentals. Or if you want to talk to us directly, you can do that every Thursday. We have a live Q&A. You can join that at strquestions.com. Thanks, guys.